Hi guys, today I decided to address some questions and comments regarding my book, Big and Strong Without Steroids. And the first question I'm going to talk about is, of course, why did I decide to write this book? After all, I'm not a Mr. Olympia or a world-class powerlifter. But what I do have is 3 decades of training without steroids. And when I say training, I don't mean training to look good on the beach. I'm talking about training to get as big and strong as naturally possible. And what I came to realize during all that time is that the information presented in all these very well-known books is not necessarily geared towards natural lifters, and significant modifications are needed to make any of that work. I received a comment on Amazon that Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding is way better than my book. And it's hard to argue with that because after all, this is an iconic book. But in return, I would like to ask that person if he actually tried any of the programs listed in this book. Because even for complete beginners, this book prescribes 6 training sessions a week. And those are not short training sessions. And when I tried them, my body fell apart on me within a month. And I remember being very confused because after all, this is written by the very best. And I was following these programs exactly as they were written here. And what helped me clarify things was a book by Stuart McRobert, Brawn. And Stuart McRobert was one of the first few people who came out and said that training with and without steroids are not as similar as advertised. Then the following natural question is, of course, then why not just use this book? And my answer to that is that I don't believe that Stuart McRobert takes full advantage of the methodology contained in any of these books. And that's why over a period of many years, I was trying to combine these very different philosophies. And this is how my training system was born. And I do believe that this is the very best for natural lifters. Now, if you do decide to take steroids, I'm not here to judge you because that's a personal choice. But I can tell you that programs that work without steroids will also work with steroids. But it doesn't work the other way around. Ever since I published this book, I started getting a lot of questions about training. And as you can imagine, not all of those questions were about getting big and strong. Because, for example, women are not really into bulking. And the same can be said for some of my friends who practice martial arts. And as I was trying to accommodate those populations, I created a whole separate training system. And I liked it so much that recently I decided to publish my second book, Fit in 1 Year. And right from the start, I want to be very clear that this is not a book for people who are less serious about training. Because I used some of the training programs presented in this book when I was getting ready for national and world championships in kickboxing. And this system is very, very real. It just takes you in slightly different direction. So instead of trying to become a Hulk, you're trying to become a well-rounded athlete. And this book is probably perfect for people in the military, firefighters, and police officers. And although there is definitely a little overlap between these books, they are very well worth the money. And I would probably recommend that you get both of them. And the money is something that I want to address separately. I remember when I was buying this book, there was a review that stated that it's now worth $36. And that's just something that really stuck in my head. Because this is a hardcover book. And it's full of beautiful pictures. And it's full of useful information. And yet somebody didn't think that it was worth $36. And this is very indicative of our current attitude towards gym knowledge. And for some bizarre reason, people just refuse to learn about proper training. And they just want to go to the gym and make stuff up. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and she told me that she worked out for 4 months and did not lose any weight whatsoever. Well, that sounds odd. So I asked her, what did she do? And she's like, exercise. So I'm like, yeah, I understand, but what specifically did you do? Well, exercise. And at that point, it became very obvious that she didn't do any real training. And this is something that I'll never be able to understand. Because we don't take the same approach with any other things in life. Because we always look for most effective ways to do things. So for example, if I wanted to clean this room, I wouldn't start mopping the ceiling or vacuuming furniture. And yet when it comes to training, people just want to go to the gym and make fools out of themselves. And while I have this book, I just want to make a quick comparison. So this book right here is an official USSR weightlifting manual. So every few years, the most elite Soviet Union weightlifting coaches would get together and update the weightlifting methodology. So this is a third edition, and this book is pretty much my age. And I'm not sure how many of these are still left. But I hope that the contrast between writing styles is rather obvious. And if you read this book, it's difficult to throw out even a single sentence out of the text. And this book doesn't cite any studies, because when serious coaches get together, they don't need to cite studies and present evidence for people to believe them, which is obviously very different for what we got going on these days. You open any popular YouTube channels and everybody wants to talk about research to make themselves sound professorial. And they also use all these sophisticated terms such as MRV, RPE, IRR, and so on. And when I was writing my book, I was actually aiming for this writing style. And I hope you can see that I came very close. And the only difference is that my book still doesn't have hardcover, which is actually one of my dreams, that my book will have hardcover one day as well. Don't let my effort to make these books to be as easy to read as possible to trick you into thinking that they are written for beginners. So for example, some people will say that information is rudimentary. In reality, the information is very, very advanced. And I think it just takes a certain level of knowledge and experience for you to be able to recognize it. And if you watch some of the videos on my training programs that I have posted on this channel, it should be pretty obvious that all of them are very, very sophisticated. And all of those training programs are taken from my books. So for example, Big and Strong Without Steroids contains 11 of my all-time favorite training programs. And I still remember how every single one of those training programs was developed. And I still have all of my notes. And to give you an example, I'm going to talk about my first hypertrophy phase. That training program was inspired by a training program of Dorian Yates that was published in the first edition of Muscle and Fitness magazine I have ever seen in 1995. While the hypertrophy phase that is included in my book was finalized in 2018. So that's 23 years in the making. And as you might know, Dorian Yates was a proponent of training each body part only once a week. And that's not in favor these days, because research showed that protein synthesis does not stay elevated for so long. So it makes sense to train each body part more often. But if you look at the training program of Dorian Yates more carefully, you will see that besides a primary training session, each body part always has a secondary training session few days later. So for example, triceps has its own primary training session with shoulders, but then it gets its secondary training session on the chest day, because we all know that triceps gets heavily involved during presses. And every single body part gets a secondary session like that in that program, except for chest. And that's why my hypertrophy phase has close grip bench presses included in triceps workout. And as you can imagine, if you are not very experienced, all these little details will go right over your head. And that's why when people tell me that they don't see anything here, I tell them that you're probably missing it. And that's not to say that I'm a Leonardo da Vinci and my books are full of these hidden messages. The reason why I'm saying it is because the information is presented in very condensed matter. And if you are completely new to this, there's very little chance that you'll be able to absorb all of it just from reading it once. And that's why I tell people who are completely new to strength training to read it 3 times. First time before they ever touch weights, second time after they've been training for 1 month, and third time after they've been trained for 1 year. And during all those times, you will be able to comprehend this information at a whole different level. And to finish this episode, I'm just going to answer a couple more questions. And the question that I get by far the most often is, what is my opinion on kettlebells? And my opinion on kettlebells is that they are highly overrated. And I think people here in the West like to believe that kettlebells are some kind of secret Soviet weapon that everybody in Russia and Ukraine is using. But in reality, when I was training back home, kettlebells would just be collecting dust in the corner of the gym. And there is such thing as kettlebell sport, but it was never really popular. And guys who were competing in that sport were never considered to be elite level athletes. And that's why, although I do understand that kettlebells are a fine modality if you want to do some swings in your garage, but if you want to take your body to an absolute limit, once again, in my personal humble opinion, I believe that kettlebells are not the way to go. Now, the last question that I'm going to address today is, what is the first book on my bookshelf? And that is an excellent observation. And the first book on my bookshelf is the Navy SEAL Physical Fitness Guide. I received this book when I was trying for Navy SEALs many years ago. And unlike what you see on social media, this book is actually an official training manual of our SEAL teams. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you what is inside of this book, but I'm pretty sure you can find this online. I don't think this information is classified. But the real reason right here why I'm showing you this is this piece of paper. And this piece of paper is the beginning of my conditioning training program. And it was written in 2004. And the reason why I'm telling you about this is to show you guys that the training methodology that is presented in my books has been developed over periods of many years. And I did take the very best from a lot of different training disciplines. And that's why I do hope that you guys check them out. Both of these books are available on Amazon, but I would only suggest that you purchase a new book because I recently made some changes in both of them and I want you guys to have the latest information. But that's all I have for you guys for today, so let me know what you think, and also if you want me to address any other training related topics in one of my future videos. So I'll see you guys later.